there, I have a question for you. Are you a creative entrepreneur or communicator who is ready to truly think like a business so you can inspire like a boss? If so, do I have the perfect guest for you today? Welcome to Perpetual Motion with Dr. Mo Anderson. This is a podcast focused on lifestyle, self-care, personal empowerment, and positive relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Mo, best-selling author, award-winning podcast host, keynote speaker, and speaker coach. My goal for every episode is to elevate, motivate, and entertain you in a manner that adds immediate value to your personal and professional growth. If you're new to the show, a returning visitor, let's make this official. Hit that subscribe button now.
You can't say Dr. Mo ain't tell ya that fear magnifies the consequences of failure. What are you scared of? Why are you afraid? I'd rather live like I'm dying than live to die. Any day, my heart is pure.
Joining me this hour is Ann Watson. She describes herself as a pop culture addict and total misfit with a passion for helping people reach their potential. After earning a degree in advertising and going into a successful career in corporate banking, she quit it all and became a stay-at-home mom, which quite frankly, parents know is a much harder job than corporate banking. And I haven't even done corporate banking, but I've raised children. What happened next in Ann Watson's life is both inspiring and instructive. Ann, welcome to Perpetual Motion.
Hey, Dr. Mo, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. As I read your bio, I cracked up when I saw that you preferred playing business over playing dolls as a child. Yeah. I was one of those kids too. I was just a little bit special. Tell me more about young Ann before you became a grown-up business beast.
Well, I think the influence of that comes from my dad, who was the CEO of a bank in Michigan, where I grew up. And he loved what he did. And he was so good with people and so smart that it just seemed natural to me that when it was, time to play, that I would set up my desk and loved office supplies and pretending to answer the phone and making business deals. But all my friends were playing with Barbies and dolls, and a lot of them were playing teacher. And I just wasn't about that. I just knew that I wanted to do something completely different.
I love that. I love that. That was me with my chemistry set, my microscope and telescope, and every Christmas and birthday. Yeah. And look at us now. Hey, it worked out.
Yeah, so, I love it.
Parents, let your kids play something else. If they don't want to play Barbie or Soldier, let them do it. It could lead to something exciting. Lesson 1. And what attracted you to advertising as a major? I alluded to that when I was introducing you. And how did that lead to a banking career? We don't typically associate the two, though maybe we should.
Well, no, it's not really a direct line between the two, but it was funny. I remember being in 8th grade and we had a speaker from Junior Achievement come, and she asked everyone in the class to say what they wanted to be when they grew up, which at that point I hadn't even considered until the girl in front of me said, "I want to be in advertising." And I thought, oh, that sounds cool. And so I said, I want to be in advertising too. But then when I looked back, I was the kid who would grab the toothpaste in the bathroom and look in the mirror and try to sell you toothpaste, And I thought it actually was a really good fit for me to do that. And so I decided to pursue this career in advertising. I actually went to college. I tried doing the business degree, but it was a little on the more boring side. I even looked at being a teacher so I could have summers off, but I just didn't like it. I tried a bunch.
It is a nice perk though.
Right. It is a nice perk. I mean, good for them, but it just wasn't, my patience level, I guess.
Sure.
But advertising offered me the business world and the creative world all at the same time, which I loved. So graduated with my degree in advertising, got a job in advertising for a couple of years, and then had my first daughter. We moved, and I looked for another advertising job and was offered a couple, but the pay was ridiculous. It was not sustainable. My husband was in med school. We had a baby. I was the primary breadwinner. I just couldn't exist off what they paid. But I had been a teller all throughout college at a bank. So I applied for a management training program there, got it, and ended up in the corporate banking world, was in the retail side for a long time, and then got to move into product development, which was actually a big piece of where advertising lives in the corporate banking world. So it did eventually merge. But the whole reason that I got into it in the first place was because I just needed to pay my bills.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty cool. I'm thinking some people listening to this might hear that your dad was a banker, that you got to be a teller, and then that you applied for this program and that everything was just easy for you. It was teed up. I know better because I had parents who were very accomplished and introduced me to a lot of opportunities, but it was also very hard. It was like people had higher expectations that I did not feel like I could always meet. So I'm wondering, when you applied for that program at the bank, did you feel really qualified? Was there a little bit of imposter syndrome there? Were you afraid?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, I have to just sort of set the record straight that I went to work for a rival bank from
Gotcha. Okay.
So there was no nepotism there at all.
Okay. Well, and thank you, because I'm trying to hear, like, listeners was here and they'd be like, wow, golden arches. And there's always a story to the story.
Right. Yeah. There was zero nepotism at all. And I honestly have to say that I think I was young enough at the time that I didn't know what I didn't know. And probably a little bit more on the confident side than I probably should have been. I actually remember one funny story where we were at an event with the CEO of the bank that I was working for, which is a rival bank to the one that my dad worked for. And I saw him and I saw the CEO and I walked up to him and I introduced myself. I told him, that I was Andy Broden's daughter, and he knew who my dad was, of course.
Sure.
So we chatted for a minute and I said, well, I just came over to introduce myself and to tell you that I'm coming for your job.
Wow.
He died laughing. I mean, he just died laughing. He was like, you go, girl. Like you're spunky. I believe you can get it. So yeah.
I admire that hubris. Look at you. Wow.
Yeah, I'm not that cocky these days because I know better now, but it was fun then. And of course it just entertained my dad. It entertained that CEO and, the boss.
But you meant it.
His jaw hit the floor. It was pretty fun.
Right. But you meant it. And we underestimate young, ambitious people sometimes while they're laughing. I know you meant every word you said. And I like that you reminded me, in fact, of the confidence that I had when I was in my 20s. I just felt like I had the golden touch. I was going after it and nothing could stop me. And as I got older and had failures and challenges and, people giving me destructive criticism, it does hinder you if you let that get into your head.
100%.
100%.
I think imposter syndrome is something we develop.
Yeah. Good point.
Learn more.
A learned toxic behavior. You're absolutely right about that, especially when we go into I would assume banking was at that time, like dentistry was for me, rather male dominated, especially in the leadership areas, not the tellers, but in the leadership areas, very male dominated. So
yes,
look at you, bad girl. So, when you're working with people, and what I'm trying to get people to understand is, what they really feel like, because sometimes people are like, she did that, but I can't, but you definitely relate to folks who are trying to move up. And I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you went hard in the paint, as they say, with banking and the advertising, combining those things in a way that you've explained to us, which I love, that you took things that you were naturally adept at and another career and kind of merged into your own specialty there. But somewhere in there, you became a wife, and mom of 3, and you decided to make some major life changes to be a stay-at-home mom. Kind of share what was going through your mind, what was happening when you made that momentous decision.
Well, it's never just one thing, right? But we had 2 kids at this point, and my husband had finished his med school residency, and we were moving from Michigan to Indiana. So he was getting his first job. So I was going to have to relocate anyway. But we had gotten to a point where daycare for 2 kids was essentially, it cost as much as I was bringing in for the family. And there was a lot of stress involved in that too, because if one of the kids couldn't go to daycare, it was really difficult for my husband or I to rearrange our schedules. Because, in banking, as long as the Federal Reserve is open, the bank is open, you have to be at your job. And as a physician with my husband, he couldn't just cancel patients. So we were coming up against a lot of challenges with just, if your kid gets sick and needs to miss a day or 2 of daycare or whatever the case may be, that combined with the cost of it, it just didn't make sense for me to stay where I was, that we could save money and save a lot of stress if I stayed home with the kids. So we made that decision. Shortly after that, after we had moved, I had another baby. So it was even more reinforced. And we were also done at that point. But I always had just this desire to work in me. It didn't make sense for me to get a job to pay all the daycare, but I wanted to work. So I would get involved, and I started a Southern Living at Home business. I started a creative memories business. I volunteered to be room parents. I was in the junior league. I was vice president of the York County Medical Society Alliance, which was where all the spouses gathered. I was constantly dipping my hands in places to feed that part of me that was ambitious and that desired to make a positive change. And none of those things quite fit, but I look back on it now and realize that all signs were pointing to entrepreneur, that was going to be in my future, but we didn't use that word back then.
Right.
So,
right. Interesting journey. And you made a very good decision, but a difficult decision for a lot of people. And, they just feel like if I get off this career track, I'm not going to be able to come back. But I mean, what a great investment of your time and energy to pour into your children, and that you had the support, of your spouse as well with that. So time passes, you're doing, as I said, the hardest job on earth, which is raising responsible young people. And they grow up and you decide, all the time I can hear that you were hustling, grinding, using your mental capacity, serving others. I'm a former junior leaguer as well. I guess sustainer is that the word we use. And
right.
What I like also is that I definitely want to remind everybody that community service is work, and it is opportunity for learning and growth. You didn't, but you have flexibility. So that's another way to keep your skills up without being tied to a desk. And then you used all of that, I'm guessing, when you got into your second act. Where did that start? Let's talk about what you're doing now. What's great about it?
Well, so when my baby was a junior, well, actually, no, he was probably middle school, I started to see that empty nest was coming, which I'm not a fan of being an empty nester at this point. I'm just going to put that out there. Like, I love the hustle and bustle and activity at home. But I could tell that it was coming. And I knew, I just kind of had this conversation with myself that I had been so wrapped up in raising my kids, I needed to find something for myself so that when my baby moved out, I didn't crumble. I needed to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up so that my identity wasn't solely wrapped up in my kids. And we had actually just discovered church. I think my oldest was 11. We started going to church. We met some friends there, and I just became really fascinated with the church world and the Bible, and we got in a small group with a pastor, and I got to ask a million questions. And so I actually was presented with an opportunity to become a women's ministry director at a large church.
Oh my.
And you want to talk about imposter syndrome. Like that journey was 5 years from going into a church for the first time to me suddenly working for a church, for a very large one in Dallas, and just felt like that either I was nuts or God was nuts, but this was just not going to go well.
All eyes on me. And I'm just going to say that might have been you.
It might have been me. Right. It might have been me. Yeah. And so
as a preacher's kid, I am so relating to this story. Oh my goodness.
Well, I had a conversation with God before I accepted the job. Mm-hmm. I said, if they offer me the job, God, I'm going to choose to believe that it is you offering me this job, and that when it gets hard, because I fully expect it to, that you will cover me.
Yes.
And that I am not powerful enough to screw up the lives of all of these women in your name.
In your name. Amen.
If you've got my back, God, then I will do this job. And I was offered the job. And so I was on staff of the church for 3 years. It was like drinking from a fire hydrant. It was my job and my hobby and my passion. It was everything. I absolutely loved it. But then God called me away from there. And I started working for a women's ministry conference. So it was equipping communicators, speakers, podcasters, writers, authors, and we would host this annual conference. I became the podcast host for it. And it was just wonderful. I loved being a part of this community of women and just helping women to essentially achieve their dreams. But what was interesting was that as I was conversing with all of these women, so much of my business and advertising background kept coming through. My natural affinity for marketing, my understanding of the way that business works, and just helping people who are trying to communicate a message apply some business principles to help them get clearer on that message, to help them make that message go further, reach more people. And it just became something that I was known for within that community. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it was probably 10 or 15 people that told me I should get paid to do this before I finally listened.
Right. And
thought, well, I don't even know what that would look like. And so at the beginning of 2019, I decided, you know what, I had another conversation with God. I'm like, God, I'm going to give you 1 year. I will business coach your people. And after a year, if it's not working, I'm going to get a real job. And I'm now in my 4th or 5th year of this now and loving it.
Congratulations. And what's really eerie is we're on Zoom. Will only be audio on the podcast, but as you were talking and referencing God, I don't know if you can see on the screen the light that's coming over your shoulder.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
You're being illuminated from heaven. I'm like, wow. Because
there's a window above me for your listeners, and the sun is shining right through it, and it's creating all of these rays.
Yes, but only at this moment, as you're giving that testimony, only at this moment did it occur, and now it's going away. So, wow, look at that confirmation. And I just love everything you shared as a Christian, as an entrepreneur, as someone with a heart for community. I told you I have an appointment coming up today, and I am looking at this scripture that came to me about 3 nights ago. I was a little anxious, and I went to my war room, and it was, as I opened up my Bible app, I've commanded you to be brave and strong, and I am with you at all times. Joshua 1:9, which is the perfect caption for what you just said. So thank you for sharing that, because not everybody who comes on here who's a Christian is so, upfront about the role of their faith in their lives. And it's certainly not a requirement, but it's something that I share. So I'm always happy to hear it and inspired by it.
Absolutely.
So what about, I like the way that you transition from, the corporate world to volunteering service in the religious world to realizing, you know what, I'm supposed to use all of this and pass it forward to help somebody else. And you should get paid for it. That's a culmination. Well, I've walked people through the journey here. We've walked them through. That's a culmination. You don't just up, or you shouldn't just up and say, I'm going to coach people when you really have no background other than, you know, an online certification in what you're talking about. And I see a lot of that happening. I'm like, you know, no shade, but you're 18 and you're going to coach me in business and you live in your parents' house. How?
Right. Exactly.
You know, now I do know a 15-year-old who has a $1 billion cookie empire. Her, I'm going to listen to, or is it lemonade, B sweet lemonade or something? Her, yeah, I'm all ears, but show me something.
Right, exactly.
Something before you can coach me is all I'm saying. So guys, look at more than just certifications when you're looking for a coach. And speaking of coaching, let's talk about some beginning strategies for building a profitable business with the great quit off, exodus, whatever we're calling it today. So many people are looking to do this. Can you give us a few takeaways?
Oh, well, for sure. But first, you know, I'd love to say that I think for a long time when I would look back at my sort of resume, you know, advertising and banking, and then some entrepreneur stuff and volunteer stuff, and then the church world, and then, you know, working with event planning, like all these things, it kind of seemed, I felt almost like I must be flighty or flaky or something. But really what it is that I just have had all of these experiences, which give me expertise in so many different areas, which allow me to help so many different types of people. Mm-hmm. So I just want to encourage your listeners that if they feel like they haven't ever just followed one long path, that's okay. Every experience that they have had and everything they've learned, and the lessons that they've learned the hard way will all come into play and be a benefit to the people that you serve. So I just hope that that's comforting for somebody out there, that you do not have to be an expert today in the area that you are in, that it is the culmination of all of your life experiences that are going to make you really effective at what you do.
I love that. Yes.
So with that being said, for beginning strategies, I would say the first thing you have to do is you've got to get really clear about the problem that you're solving, who you're solving it for, and the benefit that you expect that person to get. So I kind of put all this together in a mission statement, right? What is the problem you're solving? Who are you solving it for? And what is that result or the benefit that you want to get them? That is the first step to getting extremely focused and clear about who you are and what your business is about. And I think when you can do that, everything else can stem from there. When you've got a really strong mission statement, it helps you say stronger yeses, but almost more importantly, stronger no's. Right? The things that you don't want to do. Because when you're starting out in a business like this, when you're a digital entrepreneur, you're a coach, you are building an online business or a message, you need to be able to filter out the things you don't want to chase, the ideas you don't want to follow, just as much as the ones that you do. So getting extremely clear on your mission is so, so important. And this is a business principle that can apply to communication, can apply to education, whatever it is, knowing the problem you solve, who you're solving it for, and the benefit they get from it is just key.
Okay. What is your mission statement? Not to put you on the spot, mine is written down. I can't always say it off the top of my head, but in regards to what you just said, to summarize, what is your mission statement?
Sure. I help creatives, coaches, and entrepreneurs get really clear about what they do so that they can build a business that creates results, reach their potential, and inspires others.
Awesome. Ding. That is us getting off on the penthouse floor from this elevator. Very impressive.
Yeah. Well, and let me say though, too, that I'm going to be completely transparent with you that when I talk about my mission statement, I don't think it ever comes out of my mouth the exact same way twice. Right. And so that's not necessarily a requirement, you have to know what you're doing and who you're serving. You do not have to have a memorized line.
Yes.
And I'll also tell you that it is in my experience that somebody who's just starting out, you will create that mission statement, and then you're going to start learning. And that a year from the time you begin, your business is not going to look the same. So I want you to get really, really clear on the problem you solve, who you solve it for, and the result you want to get them. But I also want you to give yourself enough grace to know that this is not set in stone,
right.
that it can
evolves.
be slightly fluid, and it will evolve.
It evolves as you grow. And I agree completely, which is why, like I said, if you look on my website, what I might say is not the exact words, but at the core of it is nurturing, empowering people and helping them improve communication. And I also tailor it for who I'm speaking to, because if they're asking for a particular reason, then I'm intuitive enough to hone in on the part of it that is going to serve the purpose that they're asking for, or what they're looking for. And I can't, you don't always know that, but depending on the environment and who they introduce themselves as and how they couch the question, then I'm going to give them my mission statement in a way that resonates with their needs.
Exactly.
So again, the other reason that you don't just have it memorized and it's not always appropriate, even the language. If I'm speaking to someone in college over someone who's 60-year-old serial entrepreneur, a very successful CEO, there's a very different way also. So that is an excellent point. And I like the way you can take my questions and fix them and make them make them practical. And how's the strategy there? Because this is not my arena, but my point with doing this podcast is to talk and to have people like you bring out value and takeaways. So wherever we go with it, I'm happy to go. I learned so much from guests like you. Really.
I'm so glad. I'm loving this conversation.
I am too. It's really made my day. So let's go to the next step. We've talked about what you do and the why. What about for the people who are hearing this and they're thinking, she's talking to me. That's why I am. She's preaching to me, as we say in the church.
Right.
That's why I am. But I've been trying. I've taken the classes, hired the coach, and I still don't get it. I'm not making progress. I'm struggling. What do you do if you're that person that you feel like you're putting in the work, but nothing's happening for you?
Sure. And that's actually a very common thing. So if that is you're listening to this right now and you're feeling that way, stop beating yourself up immediately. We just need to go back to the basics, right? When you're feeling like you've hired the coach, you're taking the classes and none of those things are clicking, I encourage everybody, let's go back to that foundation. Let's go back to that mission statement. What is the problem you solve? Who are you solving it for? What is the benefit or the result you want to get for them? When you get off kilter on that right there, a lot of times you're trying to, you want to do this and you're like, I'm going to start a course and I'm going to do a group page on Facebook and I'm going to have group coaching and I'm going to do a podcast and I'm going to run this webinar. And suddenly you're watering down all of your efforts and you're finding you're not as effective in any one area. And it feels like you're throwing spaghetti at the wall. So
I've never heard that before. That's funny.
It does. It just feels like you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something sticks, and nothing seems like it's sticking. You need to, first of all, just take a deep breath. Mm-hmm. Like you're not alone. I think every entrepreneur experiences this at some point in their journey. But take that deep breath and then let's go back to basics. Let's do an audit of your mission. And then let's figure out one offer that you can really focus on. And you say no to all the other fabulous ideas. We're not saying no forever, but we're saying no for now. We're just going to slow down and focus on the very best offer that we have. And we're going to commit to it for 3, 6 months, 12 months, whatever you want to commit to it, and go all in on that. Because I'll tell you, entrepreneurship in today's extremely busy, very noisy world, it's just straight the long game. Mm-hmm. It requires patience, consistency, and discipline.
Discipline and persistence. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is part of discipline. Yeah.
So you got to simplify to amplify.
That's good. That's good. You're right, because and I run into it too. It's just like social media fatigue. And every time you think you've got your stuff down, for LinkedIn and Instagram, whatever. No, you need to be on TikTok this. And no, you need to be over here, Twitter, hashtag this. And no, you need to do that. And you can get pulled in a lot of directions. And you also stop being creative because you don't
100%.
have time. You don't have time to be productive because you're too busy trying to be seen everywhere on multiple platforms where your people might not even be. So that
right. You end up serving the platform instead of serving your people.
Yes. Very, very good. I like that. Good tips. What is the best way to communicate what you do to your audience? And you've kind of covered this a little bit, but I want to circle back to that question.
Well, I'm going to go just a little bit deeper because we talked about the mission statement and that's the thing that's going to drive you in your business. But when you want to begin communicating with your audience, it is so critically important to listen to your audience. So if you're brand spanking new, then I recommend that you get 3 to 5 clients that you do pro bono, right? That you're not charging, you're just getting in there and doing whatever it is you do for a couple of people. And then the price that they pay you is feedback. What are they struggling with? What are they asking themselves at 2:00 in the morning that they feel like is never getting resolved? What is that big problem? And what do they really need to feel like they can solve it? And you are doing the research and you are investigating, right? Then this is one of my favorite tips to give to people. You listen to that ideal client that you have and say you're selling widgets and your ideal client says to you, I just constantly feel like I'm never going to get this thing done. It's a perpetual job that never seems to make any progress. Then what you do in your content that you're creating, whether that's a podcast, a blog, a social media post, an email, you use those exact words. And you say, do you ever feel like you're just never going to get it all done? That no matter how much effort you put in, there's no end in sight? You use the words of your ideal client in your content. And what ends up happening 9 times out of 10 is you start to get new people who contact you and say, it's like you're in my head. And so communicating the felt needs and the struggle of your ideal client for whatever it is that your solution is what's really going to grab their attention. They're going to feel like, oh, I'm seen. That person gets me. They understand me. Once you start building that audience, then you start saying, it doesn't have to be like this. I have a solution that can help you. And you talk about your thing.
Wow, that's a favorite. And as I was thinking, as you were saying that, I get so many newsletters and stuff. It takes a lot to get me to click on one. And when I think about the ones that I've opened recently, it's because of something like that I thought, okay, that's exactly the problem I'm having. And to do it in your target's language as opposed to how we think, because you begin to think a little differently, when you're coaching and in a leadership position, but to capture the language, the words, the lexicon, and then, yes, it's going to resonate with a whole bunch of people because there are really only 3 struggles we're having: man versus man versus nature, man versus himself. So there are a limited number of questions, but getting the right one for your group, that is you said so many good things today, but that is quite one of my favorites. I'll be listening to this again real soon.
Oh, good.
Real soon. You have brought it today, Miss Watson.
I'm passionate about what I can do, if you could tell.
I can tell. I can see it, hear it, and feel it. And that makes a difference as well. And it comes through even on audio. Before we go, what are we talked about marketing, all the avenues and opportunities right there. And goodness knows, I love social media that it has opened up the gates for so many people who couldn't afford big advertising firms, agencies, budgets, PR people, and you can get out there in the right way and reach a lot of folks. But what are some unique opportunities for marketing that work?
So this is actually the really fun thing, right? And this is where we got to get creative. And I want to encourage people to sort of think outside the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to think about, what is the thing that you're trying to do or that you're trying to sell? And what do people need and how you can connect those pieces? But then how can you make it interesting or fun for someone? So for example, I had a client who had created a daily journal, and it was just beautiful, wire bound. I mean, she put so much blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. And we were at an event. She was a sponsor. She had set up a table and was just trying to get people to buy this planner. And I walked up to her and I said, "Hun, why don't you unwrap one so that people can flip through it? They can actually see it. And then why don't you have people give you on a clipboard their email addresses to be entered into a drawing to win one?" Now you're increasing your email address list, but your potential customers have the opportunity to win one, and they can flip through it and use it and imagine themselves using it. So it's not enough to just stick the planner or whatever it is on a table and hope people buy it. You've got to help people experience it. You've got to help them see how it's going to solve their problem. And that sometimes means thinking outside the box a little bit.
Thinking outside the box. And but that's great. I mean, that's important for so much merchandise. And a lot of us are vending now and going to events and getting people engaged. Even when I was in a retail business, one of the things they taught us was to try to get the product in someone's hand, and you increase their chances of purchase by like 40%. And it was, it seemed like such a small thing, but I found that if I could just get them to hold that bottle and they turn and read the label, it was like bingo. So I can see that application with the wonderful example you just gave. And I bet it made a big difference for her that day and all the days going forward. So really good tips there. Before we go, any final things you'd like to share? And then we'll, of course, talk about how to get in touch with you and connect with you online for your products and services.
Sure. The only thing that I would say is that the world of entrepreneurship is often not easy. And so prepare yourself that there are days that you're going to feel like you're not accomplishing much. There are days that are going to feel like downers, but you have to count the wins more than the hard days. And every small thing is a win, right? Mm-hmm. Like this conversation is a fantastic win for me, just because I love connecting with you. And I think we think a lot alike.
Yes, I do too.
Thank you. Fun, right?
Right.
So this may not be a paid client for me, but I still feel successful in this moment. And so I just want people to go easy on themselves, to know that it's a difficult journey as an entrepreneur, but it's so rewarding when you can focus on the rewarding pieces. So I just want to encourage everybody out there, give yourselves credit for everything that you're doing, the work that you're putting in, the blood, the sweat, the tears, the successes, the near successes, and give yourself credit for every single time you feel like you didn't do a good enough job that you learned.
Yes.
And you cannot help but be successful.
Awesome. Very, very good. So how can listeners connect with you online, social media, and your website? How do we find you?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram all the time. That's at Ann Watson TX, and that's Ann with an E, Watson, and then TX for Texas. Or you can find me on my website, which is annmwatson.com. And I would love to chat with anybody. Just drop into my DMs and say that you heard me on this podcast, and let's get chatting. Let's talk about how we can help build your coaching, creative, or entrepreneurial business together?
You know what? I missed in your bio, and we'll drop those in the show notes, what you just said, but I just heard you say you're in Texas. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Where are you?
I am in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
What?
Yes.
How did I miss that? Somebody's getting fired. Okay, I do my own background stuff, so I'm firing me. But you and I are going to connect, and I've got another guest who is in this area, and we are so like-minded. We've got to do a live because our topics, our passions, everything go together. So I'm going to circle back to that. Things to come, folks. Stay tuned. But in the meantime, please connect with my wonderful guest here today, Ann Watson at AnnMWatson.com. That's Ann with an E. Thank you and continued success, Ann.
Thanks, Dr. Mo. I appreciate it. Appreciate you.
And wasn't that a great program? Oh, love that episode. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Learn more about me on my website, drmoanderson.com. That's MOE. You can read book excerpts, watch videos, learn about my services that I offer, and book me for a speaking engagement. I'd love to talk with your group, and I'd love to work with you. So until the next time, review, renew, and renew. Thank you.